So we've got a nice Craftsman 26-inch snowblower. Basically came in, customer said it wouldn't start. The first thing I went to do is went to pull the dipstick. So I did this and back to estimate it. All that comes spilling all over the place is gas mixed with oil. So I'm going to show you what caused this. Go ahead and show you how to get that taken care of. So you can see there's just so much of it in there. I didn't even notice the dipstick up top, otherwise I probably would have went ahead and taken it out there to save myself a little bit of a mess in back. It's just everywhere. So it leaks out, goes all over the place. I figured I might want to go ahead and stop it back up there, and then I'll drain it out from the back drain. But a very common issue on these when the carburetor on them fails. So what's happened here is essentially the carburetor's failed, and it's allowed that to go ahead and drain past the carburetor and the needle and the seat in it down into the unit. So normally you have your, grab just, this isn't the same carburetor or anything like that, but got your needle and seat. Well, that wasn't a very good very good explanation there of it. Let's go over this first and I'll show you how that works here in just a second. This is a 247-889-701. It is a 208cc powermore engine, private labeled a lot of times by MTD. These were made for years. I'm not sure if they're still selling them or not. They've updated the design a little bit, but still pretty much exactly the same design, exactly the same carburetor and things like that on them. So this is the updated carburetor on them actually, as opposed to the original carburetor. But I'll just kind of show you here the needle and seat. So what happens is the fuel comes in the inlet here on this side, and it comes right straight down the middle. Then there's a little needle and seat. It moves up and down, and as it goes up, as the fuel comes up in the bowl, the float will move up and it'll shut that fuel supply off. Well, if there's any debris or dust or anything in there, that or there's any varnish, gum, anything like that, it's gonna keep that from happening. So this will come back up, or it'll stay stuck up and the fuel will just keep flowing down through. Well, it's gonna go straight up through the main jet and just continue to flood down into your engine. So it goes into the piston and cylinder first, then it'll leak down through into the crankcase. Takes quite a while sometimes, but if that rubber tip on the carburetor is damaged in any way, or there's anything up along here, that'll happen just all the time. So very common issue. I do not clean these carburetors once this happens. Someone told me that's because I make more money to do it. Well, in reality, I make more money to clean and rebuild the carburetor. But the problem is, with the price of the kit being so high, you know, and labor being so high, you're going to spend more money to rebuild the carburetor than you are going to be to replace it. Now, that may not be the case if you're doing it yourself, but a lot of these aftermarket carburetors are cheaper just to buy a full carburetor than it is to buy a rebuild kit. So that's why I recommend to do these. It's not because I make more money doing it. But all you need really is a 10mm socket. You need a screwdriver, maybe a hammer, a couple other things to get this thing done. And this can be done very, very easily, very quickly. So you want to drain that crankcase out. You can do that just by getting in the backside. You can take the 10mm out here and just tip it back, let it go out. So I'll try to go ahead and get this all done for you at once. I'm not going to try to turn this over yet or anything like that. You don't want to do that. It can damage things. If you're turning it over and you notice issues with fuel just coming out everywhere, that's going to be your issue. If it's popping or cracking or anything like that, it could be a stuck valve. It could also be this issue here. We get it quite a bit where there's so much fuel up in there, it'll act like it wants to start, but it's just the fuel trying to ignite. Yeah, so now from the bottom drain, we're getting pretty good oil right now. The fuel, oh, there it goes. The fuel sits right on top of the oil though. The fuel will sit on top. And a lot of times it makes it hard to see on the dipstick when you're trying to check the dipstick. If you're checking the dipstick and you can't really tell where it ends or begins, a lot of times that's your problem. So this one, I wiped it off before I put it back in there. On this one, you can kind of see it goes all the way up to about here is where it was showing on the dipstick. So you can see the wet mark here, and then you can kind of see the oil mark down here, somewhere in there. They probably tried to start it at some point, but... So what we always do is we always go ahead and drain these out. We let them sit for a minute, we'll tip it back up after it stops draining, and then we'll tip it back. Let everything drain out of there, and then we'll run it for about 5 minutes after we get everything good. And we'll go ahead and change it again. Now this just ensures that you've got all the residual fuel out of it. If you don't do that, some of that fuel stuck in it could cause you some issues. It's gonna definitely take away from the life of your unit over time. Bearings don't like there to be fuel or antifreeze or anything in them. Looks like there's definitely wetness on that plug. So we're just gonna go ahead and take the parts off the carburetor. There's a couple on the front. I'm gonna put this back in until we, I don't know why that's sitting so close. There we go. I'm gonna let it sit for a minute and then I'll drain it from the bottom again. Now to get this off, you just go straight back through to the middle. You're just gonna pry straight out, pop right off. I like to get the top portion here off just by kind of grabbing it with a pair of pliers, and then you hit the edge just with a hammer. Pretty easy that way. Get a little better view so you can see this. There's a 10mm bolt right at the side on here. So that's right here. You're going to see a 10mm that you're going to have to remove that also to get this off. And the only other thing you have is over on the side, and that's just a regular old Phillips head that holds the starter on. Two over to the side here. You can take the bottom one off and loosen the top one if you like. Makes it a little easier just from having to put the rest of them back on. Now that we've got that, we've got the whole assembly to get to the carburetor off at this point. The only thing left that you have to do to pull that carburetor off is just pull that plastic assembly out. So I'll go ahead and just pull straight up. Pull this piece out, and then the whole assembly comes towards you. All right. And then you just kind of move everything out of the way and peel it off. We're to the carburetor. We can take your primer line off. Nice and easy, pull straight up and out. Sometimes the spacers will come out. You just put it right back in the corresponding one. It just pushes right back in there. And then this whole assembly comes off along with the gaskets on the front. Now these gaskets are not very important, to be quite honest with you. It's not going to hurt it. It's not going to make it run bad. That's the way everything goes back together. Now it will have to be about in this position when going back together, otherwise it gets kind of jammed up, and you do want to make sure that your fuel line clamp goes on back at the downside. If it goes on where it's at there at the top, it's gonna get in the way. If you take it and you just twist, it comes right off. Now again, I don't normally clean these carburetors if they've already leaked into the crankcase. You can clean it if you'd like. We've got a couple different videos out on these same units. For now, I'm going to show you just how to replace this real quick. Get this thing back up and going in a little bit of no time. Doesn't take anything really to get them going. I'm just going to drain any fuel that's left in there. Looks like we've definitely got some fuel left. All right, so then you just, to get this off, you just pull up and out. It takes that spring right off. So the spring just pulls straight up and off. And then this, you've got to pull the carburetor towards you in order to get your governor linkage here out. So it goes straight down in to get it back down in there, but you've got to pull it out to get it up and out. So pull the carburetor away from there. Now on the back side here, there's some gaskets. These you want to replace, and 9 times out of 10 they're going to leak. If not, you run into all kinds of issues. If If you're in the field, you can try not to replace them, but if you're getting surging after that, you're going to want to take care of it. That's probably going to be where the issue's coming from. So you just move all that stuff out of the way and the whole assembly will come towards you. All right, nice and easy. Now there's a gasket on the back side. We can take it off. All right. So we're gonna do that block gasket and then the carburetor gasket also. Now what I like to use for the carburetor gasket is I like to use a Honda gasket. It's a 16221-ZH8-801. So it's a pretty common gasket on these. We use them for just about everything, and they're used from Honda and everything else. Now on this back gasket, I do like to double it up. We don't use the OEMs usually for this back gasket. We've got so many of these from kits and things laying around, we just double them up. No big deal if they're doubled up, it just gives you a little bit more protection than singly. Now if the one is stuck to the block there, you can just double up or put a single one on there also. That's not going to hurt anything whatsoever. As we get this back in, you can bring your spark plug wire and your other wires back up and over and just get everything down in there where it came from. So then our back gasket is good to go. All right, perfect. Now our carburetor gasket. Now these Hondas are plenty thick. You don't have to double those up or anything there. It's just that back one, especially with them being the aftermarket, they're just not real thick. So we like to double them up to make sure they're not going to leak. If you keep from having issues, then you know you're not going to have them. So we put them together this way to make sure we're not going to have issues. Now the carburetor we replace this with is a 951-14026A. One of the most common carburetors out there. We do a lot of these carburetors every year, but just standard carb. Now we are going to want to check this, no matter whether you use an OEM or an aftermarket. We always go ahead and open them up, we blow them out, make sure there's no metal shavings or anything in them. Sometimes there are, sometimes there aren't. We also just barely adjust. A lot of times the float isn't adjusted far enough. We want it to start sealing as it comes to about there. Before it comes to level, you want it to start sealing, otherwise it'll leak a little bit. So yeah, that's plenty. That gives it a little bit of spring tension before it comes to level. So your spring tension right there. Blow it out real quick. I can get my unit out of here. All right. Now again, we only did that really to make sure that there's no metal shavings or anything in it. Make sure that the float's set right. Many times these do come that way. So you can also, if you've got a nice jet kit around, you can make sure that it's the right size. Now, these things, 9 times out of 10, they're gonna be perfectly fine for your unit. If you're in a place where they don't have emission standards, or if you're a shop, you can go ahead and preset these. You can go ahead and make sure that jet's a good size for it. Make sure that it's not restricted by some of those same EPA restrictions that they have in other places. So, make sure you know your jet sizes if that's what you're doing. So this carburetor is now ready to go. We're going to put it on. Nice and easy. And it just slides on. Spring, I like to put it on first. Makes it a little easier for me anyway. Put the spring on. And we go ahead and put the linkage on. And again, if it's towards you, away from the back, it makes it easy to just slide right down in. Now you're all back on there. So the only thing you have to worry about at this point is that the fuel tank is clean and dry. Now this fuel doesn't look extremely bad or anything. It looks like it's been treated with something, but we still aren't going to reuse it because we don't know what the origin of it is. So if you tip it back, you can get the majority of the rest of it out of there. Still coming a little bit there, but all right, so the majority of the rest of it's out. Now we can go ahead and get the rest of the fuel and the oil that's drained down here out. Go ahead and tip that back some. Well, that worked out well. All right. It doesn't look like my mount's wanting to stay here real good. Okey-doke. Get us out of the way. All right, looks like we got the majority of it out. Now we can go up to the fuel tank. We can go ahead and get it all flushed the rest of the way out. So basically what you want to do with it, you want to remove the cap. You want to blow down into it. Now when you're blowing into it, you want to make sure that everything in that tank is completely removed. Now, if you're having an issue with it, you can do it many different ways. You can throw a clean towel down in, it'll do it a lot. Now we're about empty at that point, but what we're going to do is we're going to throw some carburetor cleaner in it and make sure that that gets dried the rest of the way out. Now it does get kind of nauseous just with the fuel. With it, all it's going to do is it's going to vaporize anything in there and turn it into a gas. Then you can blow it back through the fuel line here also. Now again, you want that completely dry. If there's any moisture left in there, could be water, could be bad fuel, could be a lot of different things, but you'll want to check that tank, make sure it's 100% dry before you're gonna call that good. If it's not, you'll run into surging or a million other things going on. So we do have the unit all drained out. We can go ahead and put the plug back in the bottom now. Put our fuel filter back in. I'm going to look there and make sure it's all cleaned out here shortly. Then we can go ahead and put our carburetor back on. Now you'll do it exactly the way you took it off, obviously, but fuel line goes on. Alright. Now again, this clamp, you'll rotate it to the bottom. That'll make sure that you're not going to have any issues with it getting in the way. Otherwise, if you're having an issue here with this not seating, just go ahead and snip a little bit of it off. It's not going to hurt anything at all. You've always got enough room. Now again, these gaskets aren't super important, nothing big there, but if you want to make sure they're in, put them in. I'll go ahead and take that back one off. Right, so it just goes straight down and in. You can put it in here and then make sure everything works good. So nice and easy, everything's back together there. We can go ahead and bend it on around. Now to put these back together, I like to go ahead and line up first. Line up the choke plate. Now if you line that up and get your choke through, then you can look back through to the side and you can line up your two prongs for your carburetor. At that point, everything's ready to be slid back together, and the only thing you have left is your primer line. Now you can grab it with a pair of needle nose, and there's still enough room at this point to get it back on, get your clamp back on, and then everything just pushes together from there. Pushes together, you lift up the top, get that back in. Now everything is exactly how it should be. So, you do have to guide your piece here for your breather. That's no big deal. Right. Everything's back together. We can go ahead and start tightening this thing back down. Two on the front. Two in the on either side. And then you've got your one on the opposite side on the front. I guess that was all that came out of it, but looks like originally it had two over here. Not a big deal as long as you get the majority of them back into place. They're just there to hold your casing in. They're not doing anything major. Now that I've got them all started, I can go ahead and tighten up this last one I put in, and then I'll go ahead and finish lining everything up. So there it goes. While I'm over here, I'm going to go ahead and tighten these two up. Those are the two on the starter. They're just Phillips heads. Tighten them back down, okay. Nice and easy. Let me back up a little here, show you a little bit wider shot. Right. There we are. Grab my other 10 mil. There it is. Okay, so tighten these down. It does look like that plastic piece is broken or something like that. It looks like someone's been in it before, maybe done one too many times. Bent pretty bad. That's okay though, no big deal. Not gonna hurt anything. Just there really, I think, to keep any kind of snow or anything like that up out of there. These just snap back right on. Perfect. All right, so we're gonna throw some fuel in this thing, throw some oil in it, fire it up and see how this thing reacts. We're also gonna go ahead and replace the plug while it's out. So we use just 5W30 on this guy. While it's out, we do use Performance Plus. It's actually a re-refined oil from Safety Clean. Not something you can buy in stores or anything like that. It's just for service use, but we get 55-gallon drums of it. It's a good quality oil and pretty cheap enough. All right, so this takes anywhere from 18 to 20 ounces to fill it back up. Now, if you're running into an issue at all where you have gas down inside the spark plug hole, before you fill this back up, you're going to want to pull this over. You're going to want to move your spark plug wire here out of the way. Oop. Yep, there goes that guy. That was a piece I was talking about, how it's been open one too many times. They like to pop off a lot. But if you move your spark plug wire out of the way, make sure it's not sparking back to anything, and you pull it over, it'll make sure anything out of the unit, anything in your spark plug hole, is out of there. So a lot of times they'll spit things out and stuff like that. This one looks pretty dry, so no big deal. We're gonna put a BPR 6ES in this thing. That's the spark plug it uses. We use NGK spark plugs. If it's got a torch in it, just replace it. Not a good quality plug. Will not last whatsoever. People have issues with them all the time. So, a lot of times if you continue to pull this thing over, you just want this out of the way, that way you don't spark your gas back. It's an easy way to start a fire if you've got fuel everywhere and you've got some spark coming. So we've got, let's see here. I'm not going to worry much about the oil. I know how much I put in it. I know how much they usually take. So, and we're going to change it just again after I run it for about 5 minutes. So again, if you have a good carburetor, or you're doing this in the field and you want to clean it, watch one of the other videos. Otherwise, this should get you all taken care of, get you back up in action. All right, a little bit of fuel and we should be all ready to test this thing out. Well, that's not working too well. Kind of hard with this bar on top in the middle, but and then you got that filter stopping you also. Filter's a lot slower than a lot of stuff, but got enough in there to test it real quick. see what this thing says. All right. So we're on choke. I've actually got it hooked up here to the electric start, so go ahead and fire her up. Originally I had the key still out, so it didn't want to start, but darn camera shut off on me, unfortunately. One of the issues I've had with the GoPro lately is that it keeps shutting off, saying it's overheating. So I'm not sure what the deal with that is, but haven't been super happy with it since I've been using it. So maybe one of those get rid of it and go back to what you were doing. But anyway, that'll get you all taken care of if you're having gas leak into your crank. Carburetor will leak a lot of times from the front of the carb. It can blow out the head gasket. It can do a lot of things if you run it like that, including ruin your engine. But let it run for about 5 minutes at this point, change the oil again, and you'll be all set and ready to rock. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe.